Firstly, thank you very much for accepting my invitation and accepting to be on my show.
My pleasure.
So I thought to tell about you and the work that you are doing and your work experience to my audience.
Okay, sounds good to me.
So can you please introduce yourself?
My name is Eric Kaufman, and I'm a former commercial real estate executive who has gotten very interested in sustainability and resilience of communities of all sizes. And I've written books on the subject. And our latest venture is called Easy Microgrids. We're trying to do a lot of renewable energy microgrids in the next 5 years, as many as we can do, large scale, to help decarbonize the world economy. So that is the main project I'm working on now. I continue to write and I continue to work with people around the world trying to make communities more sustainable and resilient. I guess that's an intro.
So you are from?
I am from Austin, Texas. Although most of my life I lived in New York City, so I have a lot of experience with New York City, which, as some people may know, just elected a new mayor. So we're going to have a lot going on in New York City. This year in Austin, Texas, a new mayor is going to be elected in November. So there's a lot of change in America, as you probably are reading about. So one of the things that the US government recently passed is an infrastructure bill, which really is encouraging renewable energy microgrids. And that's how America is hoping to decarbonize our energy use. So it's not finished yet because the politicians are still fighting. So we don't even really know how much incentive there is for solar and wind energy microgrids. But we know there is incentives to do them, and we know that the energy costs are coming way down for renewable energy. So we have a political battle here where a lot of companies want to keep pushing oil, gas, and coal because that's what they're used to. But the economics seem to be pointing in the direction of renewable energy, especially if there are no subsidies for fossil fuels. So, whoops, what we got here? Okay, sorry about that. Seems like YouTube has a mind of its own. But at any rate, that is a venture that I just started. I was thinking about it for a few years. And now with the infrastructure bill passed, we had done a similar project 7 years ago with oil and gas technology to make gas more efficient. It's called cogeneration. It's also known as combined heat and power. So I was reluctant to start this business because I know how slow municipalities and big companies and hospitals and universities move. But I think the political and public will is on our side now to really try and do these projects. What we're doing with the projects is we are trying to find creditworthy municipalities and companies so we can actually put up all the capital required to do the microgrid, and then the users will enter into a long-term contract to purchase energy. So they really won't have any out-of-pocket expense. This is called an energy as a service agreement. and it's a good way to finance these projects. So a lot of municipalities don't want to put up 5, 10, $20 million for this system. So the developer, which we will be the developer or we will be a consultant to the developer, will basically own and operate these microgrids. And the reason the microgrids are so attractive is you produce the energy on site, and with battery storage improving, we are able to hold the energy for anywhere from a half a day to 3 or 4 days maximum now. So that means when wind and solar are not operating, we may have a reserve that we can call upon with the battery storage. The battery storage makes the project more expensive, but I think with technology, what's happening is we want to have better and better battery storage, which is going to evolve over the next 5 or 10 years. So the systems that we want to build now have to be adaptable to the changing technologies in the next 5, 10, 20 years. These are basically 20-year energy purchase contracts. So we need, as I said, substantial entities to back. We have to know that they're going to be around in 20 years to buy the energy, because you're making the financial commitment to put in the infrastructure. And then you have to plan ahead that technology is going to change a lot over those 20 years. So we're going to need reserves to adapt to the new technology. So we don't really just want them to go away in the next 20 years. We want them to evolve and to actually bolster the bigger grids that all countries seem to have. I know in America we have 3 major grids. We have an East Coast grid, a West Coast grid, and a Texas grid. Where I live has its own big grid called ERCOT. And we had a big problem this past February when we had a snowstorm that was not typical, and we lost power and water for several days or more, and depending on where you lived. So what we're seeing is that these big grids are not 100% reliable. They're close, they're very reliable. And that's why the argument is just keep what we have and don't do anything new. But I think people want cleaner energy, because I've actually been to places like West Virginia where there are coal towns, and I've been to Beijing where they use so much coal that it smells like wood, but it's really not. It's coal burning, and you see people have really severe respiratory illnesses from all the fossil fuel use. And I think that developing countries like China and India have to realize that don't hold on to coal. Coal is a very, very bad substance. And whether people realize it or not, I've actually been in a coal town in West Virginia. After 10 minutes, I had a severe headache. There were only 100 people left in the whole town, and it's just so toxic. And when you think about how many major cities are reliant on fossil fuels, and it's really bad, the air that they're breathing and the water is tainted from it. So we have to really rethink the ease, at least what we have here in America, where we just flip a switch and we have power and we have energy and we have heat and we have air conditioning. And I know developing countries want all that, but there are ways to do that through renewable energy with new technologies. So this is what we're up against, that it's really when you look at it, you have 3 billion people in India and China. So that's about 40% of the world population. That's where we should be focusing renewable energy on, because the technologies have changed and it's a lot cheaper to do these things. And rather than have centralized grids only, we want to have decentralized grids. And that's what microgrids are all about. If something goes out in the main grid, you can hopefully turn on a microgrid and keep it running so people don't lose power. And in terms of heat and cooling, you need that in all places because of the changing weather patterns.
So what is your intention? What is your intention? What is the intention behind your project?
Well, my intention is to start 50 microgrids of at least 5 megawatts each, which are pretty big microgrids as microgrids go. My research has indicated that there are about 9,000 microgrids around the world, and some of those are really big, real grids. And then most of them are smaller than 5 megawatts. And this whole idea came about because here in Austin, after we had the snow event, I said to people in Austin, we should be trying to, implement microgrids now to start to decarbonize, because we have a mandate here in Austin by 2030 to get rid of a big coal plant that we're using about 570 megawatts of coal power from an agency here in Texas. So to me, it's logical to start decarbonizing here in Texas, which is known as the fossil fuel capital of the world. We have more oil and gas here than probably anywhere. So, we're finding that there isn't that much public and political will in Texas to necessarily do it, but there are 244 microgrids in the state of Texas already, so it's not something that it hasn't been done here. In fact, University of Texas has the very first microgrid, which was, of course, oil and gas, and that's over 90 years old. So this is an interesting place. I'm not sure Texas is going to be where we're going to be doing most of our microgrids. We're hoping, yes, because I live here and it's easier. And also, I think you're aware that there's big supply chain issues. So even if I can get 50 microgrids started, we're not sure when they're going to be completed because supply chain issues are real. And I think that's one of the things that we really have to resolve quickly. And I have some ideas with that where it makes more sense. I know I just walk in my neighborhood here and I see one of those plates, a big heavy plate for sewage, like for sewers. And it says right on it, it says made in India. Now, this big heavy steel plate is made in India. How does it get from India to Texas? Well, that's a really heavy item to transport thousands and thousands of miles. You start to see that our economy is so fossil fuel based that most of the stuff is coming from the Panama Canal. So it goes all the way from India to the Panama Canal, and then it comes in. And that is not particularly efficient use of transportation. When you're transporting heavy, heavy steel, you would think you would want to keep it more localized. So I think there is a new trend, and the microgrids are indicative of this trend, where you want to localize more production. When you look at Asia, you see that Asia really could supply all of its own material and goods and services between China down to Australia. I'm looking at America from Canada down to the tip of South America. In Europe, you would go from Russia down to the tip of Africa. So you start to see that geopolitically, you have three major blocks. And the more you focus on that block where you transport goods and services, the more efficient, in my opinion, it's going to be. And I think that's a major shift away from at least the way Americans have been consuming. We consume enormous amounts of goods from China, and we have to transport them long distances to get here, and they seem very cheap, the goods. And the question is, how could they be so cheap when you have all these logistics of moving goods and services thousands and thousands of miles? So I think we need an attitude or a readjustment on how we look at moving stuff around, because it doesn't make any sense to me. I can buy fish from New Zealand here in Texas, and it gets frozen and it's shipped. But I also can buy fresh fish that was never frozen, and I have to use it quickly. But that's a lot better than buying frozen fish from New Zealand. So I think what we have to rethink is we have a great opportunity with this worldwide pandemic to reevaluate a lot of our systems, because when things finally normalize, we have to rethink a lot of what we're doing at all levels. So that's where my interest is right now. And we have another business that's related to that with a not-for-profit that I founded about 8 years ago. And that's called Vegetation Station. And what that is doing is working with low-income communities and providing food in housing projects that have land but are not growing fruit and vegetables now. So that's a different group that I'm associated with, who I'm helping get some capital together to do these really related to the microgrids, because we've been finding that you take India, for example, which has a lot of sun and a lot of heat and often drought conditions. And then, of course, there are flooding conditions as well, depending on where you are. If you put your solar panels up higher, like 12 feet above the ground, underneath you can put crops. You could grow, depending on the climate, produce, vegetables, fruit, and stuff like that. So this is an interesting way, because you can actually use less water if the crops don't require direct sunlight, which a lot of them don't require direct sunlight. So it's interesting, because here in the States, California is one of the biggest producers of produce, and they have a water problem. So a lot of their fields are in direct sunlight, which a lot of the water evaporates because you have direct sunlight. So we have traditionally grown crops in direct sunlight. I think there's a real trend away from direct sunlight growing, because some crops do better in less, heat. And especially in a place like India, which is warming very rapidly, I think it would be a great way, instead of looking at coal, look at solar with crops underneath the solar to provide food. So I think the two big things that I've come to a conclusion is energy and food are going to be very stressed the next 10, 20 years as populations continue to grow. So technologists are trying to find ways to make food and energy easier to produce and more productive. What we have to be careful about is it gets back to nature. We have to be consistent with nature, because we are part of nature. We are not the ruler of nature. And I think some people still don't get that nature is so far ahead of us, because we are only a little part of a very big universe. And I think part of our problem is that we think we are better and bigger than nature. And that is insane. It just doesn't make sense. So, so what we want to do is really understand our place in the bigger picture of the universe, or whatever you want to call it. And that's where technology can be good, but it can also be bad. So I think, we're trying to do technology with an eye to being um, respectful of nature and honoring nature and understanding our role within nature better. And I think that's what young people sort of intuitively know, that is a right direction going forward. We know there's been a big migration to cities. A book I wrote in 2017 called A Call to Action: How to Save Millions of Lives was a nonfiction book about the migration from south to north. We're finding that's why, Europe doesn't want to let people into their borders. America doesn't want to let people into their borders. We have it with other areas, where nobody wants these people that can't survive in areas because there's either a flood or a drought or extreme heat or whatever it is. So I think we have to relook at migration, and we have to look at, we have a lot of people that don't have any jobs in some countries, and then we have stressed labor in other places where we don't have enough labor. And I think we have to rethink the movement of people, because that's happening regardless of our desires to keep a certain kind of person in a certain place. It doesn't work that way, because nature is basically dictating and saying, we want you out of the southern hemisphere for the most part, humans. We want you to move somewhere else, because we need to heal that part of the world that has become deserts. And I have a friend in Kenya who's an agronomist, and he's really understands what is becoming the regenerative economy. A lot of people are realizing that it's not just about decarbonizing and sustainability, and it's not just being more resilient against storms. We have to understand how to regenerate our soils, how to regenerate our communities. And some communities are probably best not having people in them anymore until they can heal. So what do you do with the hundreds of millions of people that are stranded now? There's literally probably more than hundreds of millions. There's probably a few billion people that have to be relocated over the next 10, 20 years. And you start to see you don't have the public and political will to do that. You have, not in my backyard. I don't want to be, it's like this. And I think that's a problem. I think that's a real problem. And I think we have to rethink some of that. And I know it sounds utopian that, people are going to welcome people from other places. But I think we have to rethink that. Otherwise, we're just spending money to support people in a place that really is not supportable. That's called a failed state. And there are failed states here in America. There are failed states all over the world. And the assets really have to be reworked, because we don't seem to be getting any less people in the world.
And what do you say to the decision makers who are watching and listening to our conversation from anywhere on this planet?
What was that? The decision makers?
Yeah, what do you say to the decision makers of different places of this, different parts of this planet, are watching and listening to our conversation from anywhere on this world?
You know what? When I was in China in 2005 and 2006, looking to do real estate in China, I noticed that the Chinese had embraced cell phones very quickly back then, because they didn't need regular telephones. Everything was going digital. So the fact that China was behind Europe and America allowed them to, what we call, leapfrog over other economies, because they were able to do new technology and it was cheaper than doing all the infrastructure that Europe and America had from telephones and things like that. The same thing happens now with food and energy. I think developing countries have to be creative, and they will get money from the World Bank and from, big entities that will allow them to do renewable energy, will allow them to do permaculture techniques to improve their soil. So I think there is the ability, I would say, to leaders in third world countries, embrace new technologies, be aware that technology is not everything and it will not solve everything. You still have the people issue, which is what is very important in what I write about, is the notion of community. And also, wherever possible, if you can have women run the show, it's better, I think, because women are more nurturing and creative, and that's what we need right now. We don't need military strength. I watch a lot of news around the world. There is always a lot of fighting. I think right now what we need is less fighting and more coming together as people of all kinds. So this is what we really need to do. There are so many talented people around the world, like yourself. What you're doing is great, okay? You are doing great work. And then I have a woman who's in Africa and she's getting water to small villages in Africa. Great work. So you don't have to go to Harvard University to do great work, and I think what we have to start realizing is, I call it the old white man mentality. And it's not only white men, but it's largely older people who are saying, you're young, you don't know anything yet. Wait, your time will come. We see here in America, we have a bunch of people that are way too old running our country. And, the young have an energy, even if it's not 100% directed correctly, it's still an energy. And you want to catalyze that energy. And you want us old people to help you, navigate the future. But it's your future. It's not my future. I've already lived a whole life. So, this is what I think a lot of people don't realize is you have to give up some of your power to the younger people because they are the inheritors of this beautiful planet that we live on. So I'd say that is very important, that the key is to work with nature, embrace technology, but critically to understand what's happening. There's a lot of things going on right now that some people know and some people don't know. They're going to play with carbon sequestration, it's called, and they're going to capture carbon and inject it back into the ground. And to me, that scares me because I'm not so sure they know what they're doing, the scientists that are going to do this. I've been told that Russia has been seeding clouds to get rain where it doesn't rain. I don't like that technology either very much. There are certain technologies that scare me because I think we're meddling in areas just like we did when we drilled for oil and gas and coal and mined for coal. We did not understand that taking stuff out of the earth has repercussions. It has consequences. So I think this is what I mean by be, critical of technology, but embrace it at the same time. So we need technology, but we also need community. And this notion of community is very hard to describe in words because it's feelings. When somebody is hurt, you go and you help them. You don't kick them when they're down.
So, what are the points that every person in every country who is creating things, mainly the production, what they keep in their mind in order to build the better society?
Well, it starts with the individual. I know here we in Austin are very aware of things like composting and recycling and trying to be sustainable as best we can within the fastest growing city in the US. So we have 180 people a day who move here and not too many people move out. So we're actually growing very rapidly here in Austin. And I think the key to any individual is to work with nature as best you can. So, that may mean changing your car when you can afford to, or keeping your car just because keeping the car longer is more sustainable than just getting something new. And I think we become a very consumer oriented society. So maybe we need less of that and more of this notion of community and keeping things and reusing. There's a saying, we reuse, repurpose, and recycle. Those three things are very important to sustainability. Here in America, and to a lesser extent Europe, we use way too much. The developing countries like India and China want to become like America, but there are problems with becoming like America. You have your own cultures that are very rich and older than America. So I think what we really want to do is have our cultures respected. And as we move forward, there is this migration that is going to happen no matter. We're seeing it right now. There are people that have to come to India from Myanmar, and they don't want them in. And I'm sure that it's happening all over the world in various places. All of Latin America wants to come to the US, and the US doesn't want to let them in. I think we have to rethink this because we're spending a lot of resources to keep people in a place that is not sustainable. You can't have people in the Sudan and Yemen if you don't have water. You can't grow anything without water. So, we'd be better off relocating people to places that are more habitable. But then you have the culture issues where you're putting one culture in with another culture. And that's what's happened in Europe with a lot of Muslim people coming to Europe, which is Christian secular, whatever you want to call it. And, there are cultural issues. So, the question is, how do you manage this migration? That's the issue for you people that are younger, because this migration is not going to stop. No matter what people in power try to do, people are going to try to escape adversity because they have no way to work or eat or, have a place to live. So I think that's really important. We have to understand that the migration is happening now, and we can't dismiss it.
So, in your experience, what is that thing that you cannot forget that you want to tell to the world?
It's a good question. I'd say what comes to mind is we need to be kinder to each other. And I know that sounds, I don't know, emotionally charged, but it's real. In other words, I think we have to respect that there are different cultures and there are different attitudes, and that we should be respectful of all creatures, whether they're animal or human or whatever. So if we're a little kinder and a little less impatient, maybe that is what I want to leave people with. Because younger people, I was young once, we were very impatient. And, old people move slower. So, you want to be respectful of the old. You want to respect the young too. And kindness and respect is I think universal virtues that we can gain from.
So when it comes to energy, how to generate energy, because different lands in different parts have different nature. So and like you mentioned, India have a lot of cultures, and if we see UK, US, and Germany, and when it comes to European countries, they have their different they have their own way of looking at things. So you have experienced life, you have seen a lot of things in your life. So overall, watching different people in different parts of the world, rulers, uh, people who are creating things, creating great things, you saw with your eyes, you listened their words with your ears. So all those mixture of all those things, what that taught you, that you want to inject to this planet called Earth.
Yeah, and I think it's not simple. Like you said, if you go to India, for example, and some parts of India are going to do really well with, let's say, solar. But India, from what I've read, is still very invested in coal. Now, India has a lot of people, and a lot of their cities are very polluted. And we have seen this in London and New York. These are two places I've been to, mostly New York, but I have been to London several times. When I went to London in the 80s, 1980s, London was very polluted. It was worse than New York. New York was polluted in the 80s as well. Each of these cities over the last 40 years has become less polluted through switching away from oil and coal and moving towards natural gas, which, the fossil fuel people say is clean. It is not clean. It is also fossil fuel. So we really have to evaluate each situation. And I think I want to leave people with this. The public has to understand that most municipalities are hoping to decarbonize by 2050. India has said 2070. They want more time to build their economy up before they decarbonize. I don't think that's a good strategy. I think a good strategy is to do what I said that they did in China in '05 and '06, is leapfrog over coal and go right to renewables, whether it's solar and wind, depends on the area. And each area is different. So you really need to have more than just engineers and scientists telling you, oh, this is the perfect energy. It's not linear. It's what a community wants. Can I grow vegetables alongside of a microgrid? I would hope so. You really want to rethink it around the community. As we're developing this idea, people in Nova Scotia are now trying to do affordable housing. I said to them, why not have your microgrid be the center of a housing project? Put it far enough away so there's no electrical issues, but maybe it's, I don't know, several hundred meters away from the microgrid. But that's easier to transmit energy several hundred yards than several thousand miles. So, these are the kind of questions that as you develop energy systems, you need all kinds of people. You need scientists, you need politicians, you need community leaders. You need to have a real community to determine the best use. So it's not easy. And one of the things we're trying to do is standardize certain um, standards for microgrids so they could be all over the world. We're not really just looking at America. I think the real opportunity is in China and India, to be honest with you, because you've got 40% of the population. If we could decentralize energy in those two countries alone, we would do so much good. Instead, you see, they're trying to buy more time to go on to coal. So I think that's a real problem. And I understand that people want the ease of coal, but the coal comes at a price, and it's suffering for humans in the long run, you know.
So, what is your observation and what is your take on human trying to find energy on asteroids?
On asteroids.
Yeah,
Oh, you mean like that movie Don't Look Up?
yeah,
It's interesting. I seem to be working with a lot of people from Michigan State University after that movie came out on LinkedIn. I've been linking into people at Michigan State, which was that movie, and I find it interesting. I understand why people want to explore other worlds, and I think it's fundamentally sound. Stephen Hawking had said, we're going to need 100 years on this planet before we can get to another planet. So if we have to be here for 100 years, we better figure out how to make it habitable because it's going the wrong direction as a world society. So I think asteroids are interesting. It's not my area of expertise, so I don't know very much about it. Um, and the fact that they would even come up with that, I wrote this book here, this book, which was about the billionaires, or I called them the trillionaires. They were trying to do artificial intelligence so we wouldn't need people to work anymore, so they wouldn't have to pay people, and the people wouldn't have to, do anything except basically, hang around. So, and I don't think that is what we want, but in some ways that is what's happening. And in other words, what happened in that movie Don't Look Up is what a lot of people are saying is that we are so married to acquiring assets, whatever they are, whether they're energy or food or just acquiring assets, it's not really the answer. So I would say I don't have enough information to determine whether we're going to get energy from asteroids.
so like you said, your book is connected with AI. So, what is going to be the future technology?
Well, I know 3D printing seems to be really happening quickly. This battery storage is happening very quickly. I'm just trying to think of near-term technologies. AI is very big, and will get bigger and bigger and bigger. So in our lifetime or your lifetime, AI will become very big. I know some people who have already started to like put chips in themselves. I mean, I have this watch, Fitbit, that basically is a version of what they want to put inside. There are people that think when you get a COVID vaccine, they're implanting chips into you. I don't agree with that. I don't think they're at that point that a shot is going to implant, um, you know, into your body a tracking device or whatever. We already have that with our phones. We're all trackable. So I think what's going to happen is these implants are going to go into our body, but that will probably take a lot longer than my lifetime. Things tend to happen slower than we want them to happen. When I write science fiction, we're writing 60 years in the future, pretty much. And in the future, we'll probably have neural implants that will start to work on dementia and things like that. So we can actually replace, brain matter that's damaged through neural implants. And that's a field that's probably not going to take off for 10, 20, 30 years. It's because I know from virtual reality, I've been watching virtual reality for 30 years and it's still not really here. So, these technologies take a lot longer than we want them to take. But the general trend is virtual reality, augmented reality, artificial intelligence, 3D printing, all these technologies are going to be pretty big. The battery storage will be important too. That's what comes to mind. I'm sure there's others. Quantum computing is probably longer away. And all these things, keep in mind, this is what a lot of people don't realize, is that they require like electricity, enormous amounts of electricity. As technology companies keep doing more artificial intelligence, we're going to need more power. So how are we going to produce that power is the issue. Come on. Wait, I'm on the phone. Sorry. My little dog. Little Chihuahua. I take care of my mother. She's 86 and she has very severe dementia. So we run a little bit of a nursing home here. So does that pretty much surmise what you needed?
Yeah, I have a last question. So, what do you say about Elon Musk's projects?
It's interesting because Elon Musk now lives in Austin, where I live. So I have never met Elon Musk. He is very interesting, and I think his ideas are revolutionary. There are certain things that are interesting to me that I'm not sure that the Tesla car is the way of the future. I know that Toyota is very committed to hydrogen fuel cells, and hydrogen fuel cells is technology I'm looking at for energy. I think that he was in the right place at the right time with both PayPal and Tesla. Solar City, which is a company his cousin had started and he took over and rolled into Tesla, is maybe in some ways not the perfect technology, but what Elon Musk has been able to do is be at the right place at the right time and astutely call the trends that way. And I'm sure his SpaceX down in South Texas is also on the right track, just like Bezos and Branson are doing with space. And I think these are actually good things that they're doing, because having the private sector get involved with commercializing space travel is not a bad thing. A lot of people say, oh, why not just focus on, Earth? Well, I think it's human nature to be curious and to want to do a lot of different things. So I think Elon Musk, I give him a 7 out of 10. That he's got some great ability to get things done, and he's got some really good ideas. But I think some of the ideas, like when he sold a lot of Tesla stock, I think he knows that this may not be the end-all technology, that the electric car as it exists right now runs on very heavy lithium batteries, and I'm not sure that is the end-all technology. But this is where we're moving, and we're moving towards electric vehicles with these big batteries. So it remains to be seen whether that technology is going to win in the end. I think commercialization of it is starting to happen big time now. So, like anybody else, he's got his pluses and minuses. Ooh.
Would you be ready to go to Anya?
I am.
Oh,
I got to get my hair done.
Thank you. Okay.
Hey, it was great. Thank you so much.
It's
Namaste.
Namaste, Eric. Thank you very much for the wonderful words and the great motivational words, and also the thought changing words. And I'm sure because of your impact, there will be some change in some country or in some community or in some place because of you. Even if one person changes, and if it changes some part of the world, I'll be very happy.
Me too. That's exactly right. One at a time. We change one person at a time. It's a good way to end the chat.
So you have any last message to the world?
Nope, I have no. I'm just gonna go on with my life, and that's what everybody should do. Go on with your life, and have
So
no fear. No fear.
no fear.
No fear.
Awesome. So what do you say about my work? You saw my work and me talking with different country people who are into different professions. I'm a
I think
software
it's.
engineer.
I think it's perfect. You keep doing what you're doing, and grow it, and grow what you're doing because you're on the right track. You are definitely on the right track. Keep going.
Thank you, Eric. Can I put this video on my YouTube channel with your permission?
Sure. And can you send me a link so I can use it as well?
Yeah, I will send you once I publish it. And also, can I put this on my podcast, website, internet, social media, everywhere with your permission?
Yes, you have my permission.
Thank you, Eric. Keep doing, keep inspiring, and keep changing, and be the main reason for the great things on this planet.
Thank you, Sacha Iran.